He called her worthless, incompetent, too slow to even pour wine correctly. He humiliated her in front of Chicago's elite and had her thrown out like garbage. But what this billionaire didn't know, what nobody knew, was that this clumsy waitress spoke 5 languages fluently. And when his business partner whispered 3 sentences in Dutch, thinking no one could understand, she heard everything. She heard the $100 million trap that was about to destroy him. Now here's the thing that'll blow your mind. She could have walked away. She could have let the man who just crushed her dignity lose everything. But what she did instead, it changed both their lives forever. Stay with me, because this story has a twist that'll leave you speechless. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes life has a funny way of testing us right when we think we've hit rock bottom. Let me tell you about a woman named Sophie Turner and the night that changed everything. Picture this, Chicago, on a cold November evening. The kind of night where the wind cuts through your coat and makes you question every choice that brought you to that moment. Sophie was working her second shift of the day at the Sterling Room, one of those fancy rooftop restaurants where a single meal costs more than most people's weekly rent. Sophie wasn't supposed to be there. 3 years earlier, she'd been at the top of her graduating class at Northwestern University, studying linguistics and international languages. She could speak 5 languages fluently: Spanish, French, German, Dutch, and Mandarin. She had dreams of working for the United Nations, of traveling the world, of making a difference. But then life happened. Her parents died in a car crash. Her little sister, Emma, who was only 16 at the time, was left paralyzed from the waist down. The insurance money dried up faster than rain on summer pavement. Sophie's scholarship didn't cover living expenses for 2 people, and definitely not the endless medical bills. So she dropped out. She traded her textbooks for serving trays. She traded her dreams for survival. On this particular night, Sophie's feet were screaming. She'd been standing for 11 hours straight, pulling a double shift because her landlord had raised the rent again without warning. Her uniform was starting to feel like a prison, and every step sent jolts of pain up her legs. But she kept her smile on. She had to, because Table 7 was occupied by the most important man in Chicago, Damian Cross. Everyone knew Damian Cross. At 33 years old, he was the youngest real estate mogul in the country, the man who bought and sold skyscrapers like other people bought coffee. He owned half the buildings in downtown Chicago, and he was known for 2 things: his brilliant business mind and his terrible temper. Tonight, he was closing a massive deal with a Dutch investor named Henrik van der Berg. Word in the kitchen was that this deal was worth over $100 million. It would give Damian control of the entire waterfront development project. Sophie approached the table carefully, carrying a bottle of their finest wine, a vintage that cost more than her monthly salary. Damian was scrolling through his phone, not even looking up. His assistant sat beside him, practically vibrating with nervousness. And across from them sat Henrik, a large man with cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach his face. "Wine?" Sophie asked softly, her voice professional and distant. "Just pour it and try not to take all night," Damian snapped without looking at her. He said it like she was an annoying fly buzzing around his head. Sophie's hands were steady as she uncorked the bottle. She'd done this 1,000 times. But as she moved to pour for Henrik, something happened. The older man shifted in his seat suddenly, and his elbow knocked against her arm. The wine splashed forward, dark red against the cream fabric of Damian's expensive coat. Time seemed to stop. The entire restaurant went silent. Every head turned toward Table 7. Damian looked down at his coat, at the wine spreading across the fabric like blood. Then he looked up at Sophie, and his eyes were like ice. "Are you serious right now?" His voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire restaurant. "Do you have any idea how much this coat costs? Do you have any idea how important this meeting is?" "Sir, I'm so sorry," Sophie whispered, reaching for a napkin. "Let me." "Don't touch it," Damian snarled, standing up. He was tall, towering over her, and in that moment, Sophie felt about 2 inches high. "You know what? I don't even want your apology. What I want is for you to be competent. What I want is for you to do your job without destroying my property." Henrik laughed, a cruel sound that made Sophie's stomach turn. The assistant looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Cross," Sophie said again, her voice shaking now. She could feel tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of everyone. Sorry doesn't clean my coat, Damien said coldly. He turned to the restaurant manager, who had come rushing over. Get her out of my sight. I want someone else serving this table. Someone who actually knows what they're doing. The manager grabbed Sophie's arm, his face purple with rage and embarrassment. Turner, go to the back. Now. We'll discuss your employment after closing. Sophie stood there for one more second, holding the wine bottle, feeling the weight of every eye in the restaurant on her. She felt humiliated. Small. Worthless. But then Henrik said something. He turned to the window, speaking in Dutch to someone on his phone. His voice was low, but Sophie heard every word. De idiot heeft geen idee dat de contracten vervolstzin. Tegen de tid dat hij het doorheeft, bezitten wij alles. The idiot has no idea the contracts are forged. By the time he figures it out, we'll own everything. Sophie's blood ran cold. She understood every word. And she realized that this wasn't just about a ruined coat. This was about $100 million fraud. This man was about to steal everything from Damien Cross, and Damien had no idea. She should walk away. She should let the arrogant billionaire who just humiliated her get exactly what he deserved. She should go home, cry into her pillow, and forget this night ever happened. But Sophie Turner wasn't that kind of person. Even when life had beaten her down, even when she'd lost everything, she'd never lost her integrity. So instead of walking away, Sophie took a deep breath and did something that would change her life forever. She spoke. He's lying to you. Sophie's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Clear. Strong. Completely unexpected. Damien froze. He turned slowly, confusion written all over his face. Excuse me? The manager grabbed Sophie's arm harder. Turner, I said go to the... He's lying to you about the contracts, Sophie repeated, louder this time. She pulled her arm free and stepped closer to the table, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. If you sign those papers, Mr. Cross, you'll lose everything. You could have heard a pin drop in that restaurant. Damien stared at her like she'd grown a second head. The sheer audacity of a waitress interrupting $100 million deal was unheard of. It was insane. It was career suicide. But Sophie wasn't thinking about her career anymore. She was thinking about right and wrong. What did you just say? Damien's voice was dangerously quiet. Call security, the assistant squeaked. She's obviously... No. Damien held up his hand, silencing everyone. His eyes never left Sophie's face. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself before I have you arrested for harassment. Henrik laughed nervously. Damien, please. This is ridiculous. The girl is clearly disturbed. She spills wine on you, and now she's making up stories too. I'm not making anything up, Sophie said, her voice steady now. She looked directly at Damien. 30 seconds ago, Mr. Vanderberg received a phone call. He turned to the window and spoke in Dutch. He assumed no one in this restaurant could understand him. Damien's eyes narrowed. And he said, and I quote, the idiot has no idea the contracts are forged. By the time he figures it out, we'll own everything. The color drained from Henrik's face so fast it was almost comical. He jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's a lie. She's lying. She's just some waitress trying to. How do you know what he said? Damien interrupted, still looking at Sophie. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Something calculating. Because I speak Dutch, Sophie said simply. I also speak French, German, Spanish, and Mandarin. I studied linguistics and international languages at Northwestern University before She trailed off. Before I lost everything. Before I had to give up my dreams to take care of my paralyzed sister. Before I became invisible. Damien studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned to Henrik, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Henrik, Damien said softly. What did you say on that phone call? I said nothing of the sort, Henrik sputtered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. I was speaking to my assistant about dinner plans. This woman is clearly trying to sabotage our deal. She's probably working for your competitors. She spills wine on you and suddenly she's making accusations? It's too convenient. Then you won't mind if I call your assistant to confirm, Damien said, pulling out his phone. That won't be necessary, Henrik said quickly. I'm insulted that you would take the word of a clumsy waitress over mine. I've known you for 3 years, Damien. We've done business together. And you're going to believe her? Damien looked at his assistant. Pull up the contract. Section 12, the property transfer clause. The assistant's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard. A moment later, his face went pale. Sir, there's a subsection here that wasn't in the original draft we reviewed. It says that ownership reverts to Vanderburg Holdings if any of the pre-existing structures are demolished or modified within 5 years. Which is every single building on the waterfront, Damien said quietly. We were planning to demolish and rebuild the entire district. It's standard protection language, Henrik protested, but his voice was shaking now. It's just to ensure historical preservation. You don't care about historical preservation, Sophie said, her voice hard. She couldn't believe she was still talking, still standing there, but something inside her had snapped. You care about stealing his money. You set up a trap. You knew he planned to redevelop the waterfront. You knew that the moment he started demolition, you'd take back ownership of everything. He'd pay you $100 million for property he could never actually use. Damien pulled up something on his tablet, his jaw clenched so tight Sophie could see the muscle twitching. He was reading the contract, really reading it now, and she could see the moment he understood. The moment he realized how close he'd come to losing everything. Get out, Damien said, his voice like steel. Damien, we can renegotiate, Henrik started. Get out of my restaurant. Get out of my city. And if you ever try to do business in Chicago again, I will make it my personal mission to destroy you. Damien stood up, and he looked like a king passing judgment. I'm calling my legal team. I'm calling the state's attorney. And I'm making sure everyone in the industry knows exactly what kind of man Henrik Vanderburg really is. Henrik grabbed his briefcase, his face twisted with rage. As he passed Sophie, he leaned in close and whispered in English. You just made a very powerful enemy, little girl. But Sophie didn't flinch. She'd faced worse than angry businessmen. She'd faced losing her parents, watching her sister fight for her life, giving up everything she'd ever dreamed of. Henrik Vanderburg didn't scare her. He left, and the restaurant slowly came back to life, the other diners returning to their meals and conversations, though everyone kept glancing at table 7. Damien sat back down slowly. He looked at Sophie for a long moment, really looked at her this time. Not through her, but at her. What's your name? He asked. Sophie Turner. Sophie Turner, he repeated. You just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my career. Sophie stood there, suddenly very aware that she was still holding a wine-stained napkin, that her uniform was wrinkled, that her feet were killing her, and that she'd just spoken to a billionaire like an equal. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and reality was creeping back in. I should probably go, Sophie said quietly. I'm sure I'm fired anyway. You're not fired, Damien said immediately. Then he looked at the manager, who was hovering nearby looking confused and terrified. She's not fired. In fact, everyone can take the rest of the night off. I'm closing out the entire restaurant. Put it on my account. The manager nodded quickly and scurried away. Damien gestured to the chair Henrik had vacated. Sit. Mr. Cross, I don't think. Please, Damien said, and there was something different in his voice now. Something almost human. Sit. I owe you an apology and an explanation. Sophie hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair. It felt wrong, sitting at a table she should be serving. But Damien was looking at her like she was a person now, not a piece of furniture. I was cruel to you, Damien said bluntly. The wine on my coat, it wasn't even your fault. Vanderburg bumped your arm. I saw it, but I was stressed about the deal, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Sophie didn't know what to say. Billionaires didn't apologize. At least, not in her experience. I also made assumptions about you based on your job, Damien continued. I looked at you and saw a waitress. I didn't see someone who studied at Northwestern. I didn't see someone who speaks 5 languages. I didn't see you at all. He paused. That was also wrong. Thank you, Sophie said softly. I appreciate that. Damien leaned forward, his eyes intense. Why did you help me? I humiliated you in front of everyone. I tried to get you fired. You could have just walked away and let me sign those contracts. I would have deserved it. Sophie thought about that question. It was a good question. Why had she helped him? Because it was the right thing to do, she said finally. I've lost a lot in my life, Mr. Cross. My parents, my education, my future. But I haven't lost who I am. And who I am is someone who speaks up when she sees something wrong, even when it's hard. Even when the person I'm helping doesn't deserve it. Something flickered in Damien's eyes. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Tell me about yourself, he said. Your story. I want to know who Sophie Turner really is. And so Sophie told him. She told him about Northwestern, about her dreams of working in international relations. She told him about the car accident, about Emma's paralysis, about the medical bills that never stopped coming. She told him about dropping out, about taking whatever jobs she could find, about working herself to exhaustion just to keep her head above water. Damien listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're wasted here," he said finally. "Excuse me?" "You're brilliant, Sophie. You speak 5 languages. You caught a multi-million-dollar fraud in seconds. You have a degree in linguistics from one of the best universities in the country." He shook his head. "And you're pouring wine for people who don't even see you. It's a waste." Sophie felt a flicker of anger. "It's not a waste. It's survival. It's taking care of my sister. It's doing what I have to do." "I know," Damien said quickly. "I'm not criticizing you. I'm saying you deserve better. And I want to offer you something." Sophie's heart started beating faster. "What kind of something?" "I need someone I can trust," Damien said. "Someone who can sit in on international deals and tell me when people are lying. Someone who understands languages and cultures and can help me navigate negotiations. Someone who's not afraid to speak truth to power, even when it's uncomfortable." He looked directly at her. "I need you. You want to hire me?" Sophie asked, not quite believing it. "I want to hire you as my director of international relations. Starting salary is $200,000 a year, plus full medical coverage for you and any dependents. That includes your sister." Sophie felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. $200,000. Full medical coverage for Emma. It was more money than she'd ever imagined making. It was enough to change everything. "I don't have my degree," she whispered. "I don't care about a piece of paper," Damien said. "You just proved you're smarter than half the people in my company. The job is yours if you want it." Sophie's mind was racing. This was everything she'd dreamed of, handed to her on a silver platter. But there was something in Damien's eyes, something intense and complicated, that made her nervous. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "Is this guilt? Because you feel bad about how you treated me?" "Partly," Damien admitted. "But mostly because you're exactly what I need. I'm surrounded by yes-men and people who are too afraid to challenge me. You're not afraid. You proved that tonight." He leaned back. "I need someone like you in my life, Sophie. In my business. Someone who'll tell me the truth, even when it's hard." Sophie thought about Emma, about the medical bills, about the tiny apartment with the broken heater. She thought about going back to Northwestern, maybe finishing her degree part-time. She thought about having a future again, instead of just surviving day to day. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Damien smiled, and it transformed his face. He wasn't cold anymore. He looked almost kind. "Good," he said. "Can you start Monday?" "I need to give notice here." "I'll handle it. I'll buy out your contract or whatever they need." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "Come to my office Monday morning, 9 a.m. We'll get you set up." Sophie took the card, her hands shaking slightly. This was real. This was actually happening. But as she looked at Damien Cross, at the intensity in his eyes and the way he was looking at her like she was the most important person in the world, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much bigger and more complicated than just a job. She had no idea how right she was. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sophie moved from the restaurant to a corner office on the 42nd floor of the Cross Tower. She had her own assistant, her own expense account, and more responsibility than she'd ever imagined. Emma was set up in a state-of-the-art medical facility, receiving the best physical therapy money could buy. For the first time in 3 years, Sophie could breathe. But something wasn't right. Damien was different at work than he'd been that night at the restaurant. He was cold again, distant, barking orders and expecting perfection. Sophie told herself it was just his professional demeanor, that he had to maintain boundaries with his employees. But sometimes she'd catch him looking at her with that same intensity from the restaurant, and she'd feel something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with business. The crisis came 3 weeks into her new job. Sophie was reviewing contracts for a new development deal in Amsterdam when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Mevrouw Turner." The voice was smooth, accented. "Dutch. I hope I'm not interrupting." Sophie's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. "Mr. van der Berg." "Ah, good. You remember me." Henrik chuckled. "I've been thinking about you, Sophie. About how you cost me $100 million. About how you humiliated me in front of my peers." "You humiliated yourself with your fraud," Sophie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Henrik said, his voice hardening. I know everything about you. I know about your sister Emma at the Lakeview Rehabilitation Center. I know about your little apartment on Maple Street. I know your sister's nurse schedule, when she's alone, when she's vulnerable. Sophie felt like she couldn't breathe. If you touch her— I don't want to touch her, Henrik interrupted. I want you to do something for me. Damien is closing a deal next week with a Belgian company. $500 million. I need you to make sure that deal fails. No. Listen carefully, Sophie. If that deal goes through, I will make one phone call, and your sister will have an accident. A terrible, tragic accident. But if you sabotage the negotiations, if you mistranslate or give Damien bad advice, if you make sure he walks away from that table with nothing, then Emma stays safe. You're insane, Sophie whispered. I'm a businessman who doesn't like to lose, Henrik corrected. You have 1 week. Make the right choice. The line went dead. Sophie sat there, staring at her phone, feeling her entire world crumbling around her again. She'd worked so hard to build something good, something stable. And now it was all falling apart. She couldn't tell Damien. If she did, Henrik would find out somehow. He clearly had resources, connections. And Emma would pay the price. But if she sabotaged the deal, she'd lose everything. Her job, her integrity, Damien's trust. And Damien would lose $500 million. Sophie put her head in her hands and tried not to cry. Sophie. She looked up. Damien was standing in her doorway, his expression concerned. Are you okay? He asked. I'm fine, Sophie lied, forcing a smile. Just tired. Damien came into her office and closed the door behind him. He sat on the edge of her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne. You're not fine, he said gently. I know that look. Something's wrong. Sophie wanted to tell him. God, she wanted to tell him everything. But every time she opened her mouth, she thought about Emma, alone and vulnerable. It's nothing, she said. Just stress. Damien studied her face. Sophie, I need you to be honest with me. Has someone contacted you? Threatened you? Sophie's eyes widened. How did he know? I'm not stupid, Damien said. Vanderberg disappeared after our confrontation, but men like him don't just slink away quietly. They plot revenge. He leaned forward. Did he call you? Sophie's resolve crumbled. She was so tired of carrying everything alone. He knows about Emma, she whispered. He knows where she is when she's alone. He said if I don't sabotage the Belgian deal next week, he'll hurt her. Damien's expression went from concern to absolutely furious in the span of a heartbeat. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. Deadly calm. Did he specify how you should sabotage it? He wants me to mistranslate or give you bad advice during the negotiation. Okay, Damien said, standing up. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next hour, Damien made a series of phone calls. He hired private security for Emma, former Secret Service agents who would watch her 24/7. He contacted his lawyers, who began building a harassment and extortion case against Henrik. He even called the FBI. You're not alone in this, Sophie, Damien said when he finally put his phone down. Vanderberg made a mistake. He threatened someone under my protection. I'm not under your protection, Sophie said. I'm just your employee. Damien looked at her, and there was something raw in his eyes. You're not just anything, Sophie. You're the first person in years who's treated me like a human being instead of a checkbook. You're the only person in this building who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. You're important to me. Sophie's breath caught. The air between them felt electric. Damien, she whispered. I know the timing is terrible, he said. I know you probably think I'm just your boss, and this is inappropriate, but I need you to know that you're not alone. Whatever happens with Vanderberg, whatever happens with this deal, I'm with you. Okay. Sophie nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Now, Damien said, his voice returning to business mode, let's talk about how we're going to destroy Henrik Vanderberg once and for all. The Belgian deal was set to close at the Grand Hotel, in a private conference room overlooking Lake Michigan. Sophie walked in wearing a navy suit that Damien had insisted on buying her, her hair pulled back in a professional bun, and her heart in her throat. She knew Emma was safe. The security team had checked in 3 times that morning. But she also knew Henrik was dangerous, and desperate men did desperate things. The Belgians were already there when Sophie and Damien arrived. 3 executives from a manufacturing company that was looking to expand into the American market. They were friendly, professional, and completely unaware of the drama happening behind the scenes. And then Henrik walked in. Sophie's blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't his deal. Henrik, Damien said coolly. What are you doing here? I'm consulting for the Belgian team now, Henrik said with a snake's smile. They wanted someone with experience in the American market. Someone who knows how you operate, Damien. The Belgians looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. The meeting began. Papers were spread across the table, laptops opened, projectors turned on. It was all very normal, very professional. But Sophie could feel the tension humming beneath the surface like a live wire. Halfway through the presentation, Henrik turned to the Belgians and began speaking in Dutch. He was talking fast, using technical jargon, and Sophie had to concentrate to follow. But what she heard made her stomach drop. Henrik was telling them that Damien's company was under federal investigation for tax fraud. He was showing them falsified documents, fake news articles, manufactured evidence. He was systematically destroying Damien's reputation, right there at the negotiating table. And the Belgians were believing him. Sophie could see it in their faces, the way they were looking at Damien now with suspicion and doubt. This was it. This was the moment. Sophie could stay silent, let the deal fall apart, let Henrik win. Keep Emma safe. Or she could speak up. Again. She could risk everything. Again. Sophie thought about what Damien had said. You're not alone. She thought about the security team watching Emma, about the lawyers building a case, about the FBI investigating Henrik's business practices. She thought about who she was, who she'd always been, and she made her choice. Excuse me, Sophie said, her voice cutting through Henrik's monologue. She was speaking in Dutch now, and every head turned toward her. Mr. Vanderberg is lying to you. Henrik's face went purple. Sophie, don't. He just told you that Cross Developments is under federal investigation for tax fraud. Sophie continued in flawless Dutch. That's completely false. What he didn't tell you is that he himself is currently being investigated by the FBI for extortion and fraud. She pulled out her phone and brought up a document. These are the actual financial records for Cross Developments, which show that we've passed every audit for the past 5 years with perfect marks. And this, she swiped to another document, is the FBI case file against Henrik Vanderberg, which includes charges of contract fraud, extortion, and threatening a federal witness. That witness is me. The Belgians were staring at Henrik now, and he looked like a cornered animal. She's making this up, Henrik sputtered. She's trying to sabotage. I'm trying to save you from making a terrible mistake, Sophie said, switching to English so Damien could understand. Mr. Vanderberg called me last week and threatened to harm my disabled sister if I didn't sabotage this deal. He's a criminal, and if you do business with him, you'll be implicated in his crimes. One of the Belgian executives stood up. Is this true? He demanded, looking at Henrik. No, she's lying, I have recordings, Sophie said quietly. Of the phone call. Of the threats. Everything. She did too. Damien's security team had helped her set it up, just in case. Henrik looked at Sophie with pure hatred. Then he grabbed his briefcase and bolted for the door. He didn't make it very far. 2 FBI agents were waiting in the hallway. They'd been there the whole time, listening to everything through the wire Sophie was wearing. As Henrik was led away in handcuffs, shouting in Dutch about lawyers and conspiracies, Sophie felt her legs go weak. Damien was there immediately, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. You okay? He murmured. I think so, Sophie whispered back. The Belgian executives were apologizing profusely, saying they'd had no idea, asking if they could proceed with the deal. Damien handled them smoothly, professionally, but Sophie could see the tension in his shoulders. 2 hours later, the deal was signed. $500 million. The biggest contract of Damien's career. And when the Belgians finally left, when it was just Sophie and Damien alone in that conference room with the lake stretching out before them, Damien turned to her. You were amazing, he said. I was terrified, Sophie admitted. I know. That's what made it amazing. Damien stepped closer. Sophie, I need to tell you something. What? When you dropped out of Northwestern, when you gave up your dreams to take care of your sister, you thought you were losing everything. But you weren't losing anything. You were becoming exactly who you were meant to be. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. What do you mean? You're the strongest person I've ever met, Damien said simply. You're brilliant and brave and kind, even when life has given you every reason not to be. And I. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I'm in love with you. Sophie's breath caught. Damien, I know I'm your boss. I know the power dynamic is complicated. I know I was terrible to you when we first met. But I can't keep pretending that you're just my employee when you're so much more than that. What am I? Sophie whispered. You're everything, Damien said. You're my conscience, my advisor, my friend. You're the person who makes me want to be better than I am. And I don't want to do this life without you. Sophie looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a billionaire or a boss, but a man who'd learned to see her. Really see her. I love you too, she said. Damien smiled, that rare genuine smile that transformed his whole face, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise. 6 months later, Sophie stood on a stage at Northwestern University, wearing a cap and gown. She'd finished her degree, working part-time while running Damien's international division. Emma was in the front row, standing with the help of new braces, cheering louder than anyone. And Damien was beside her, holding her hand, looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. Because to him she was. Sophie Turner had started out invisible, a waitress nobody saw. But she'd never been invisible. She'd just been waiting for the moment when the world would finally catch up to who she'd always been. A woman who understood everything, including her own worth. Remember, friends, you never know who you're standing next to. That waitress, that cashier, that person you barely glance at, they might be the most brilliant person in the room. Treat everyone with kindness. You never know when that kindness might save you, or when cruelty might cost you everything.